Welcome to Fireside Gaming. I'm Billum, and today I want to talk to you about Hollow Knight, a game that I took way too long to play and almost gave up on. So first things first, my wife, Loxia, was on my case for years telling me to play this game, just constantly reminding me of it and trying to get me to play it. She's done this consistently with 3 games, to the point that if I even mentioned out loud that I didn't know what to play whenever I was browsing our game shelf, I would get hit with some variant of, you could play Hollow Knight or Ori or Shantae. And for so long, I kept putting off those recommendations. Not because I'm against playing them. Heck, I've even played a couple of the Shantae games already, just not the original. But more because I just never felt overly excited to do so. So when the Hollow Knight bug finally bit me, needless to say, I was hyped to finally get to this game I'd been recommended for ages now. Not just by my wife, but plenty of other people as well. And yet, I almost dropped the game. Because of that, I only have footage from the first few hours of Hollow Knight, meaning I won't be showing any later parts of the game. Though I can throw up my Steam achievements on screen just in case someone thinks I'm lying about beating it. Why would someone think that? Well, Hollow Knight has this reputation for being really hard. So much so that plenty of people call it 2D Dark Souls. I'm not one of them. In fact, that designation is what almost led to me quitting Hollow Knight. See, I went into the game fully expecting a 2D Dark Souls game. But that's not what Hollow Knight is. Sure, there are a few similarities, like losing your Geo, the main currency of Hollow Nest, when defeated, and being able to return and pick it back up. But the comparisons stop about there, at least as far as the gameplay goes. Story-wise, Hollow Knight is very similar to a Souls game in how it reveals its plot and the way players interact with NPCs and progress their personal quest lines. Now, maybe I'm just stupid. In fact, I probably am. But for those first few hours of playing Hollow Knight, I just kept trying to cram it into that Souls-like box, but couldn't. And because of that, I grew more and more frustrated with the game and its mechanics. It wasn't until I took a break from the game that it dawned on me I was looking at it all wrong. Hollow Knight isn't a Souls-like, it's a Metroidvania. I don't know why it took so long for me to come to this realization. Maybe it was always being told that it's 2D Dark Souls for years even before playing it that it really cemented it in my mind as being a Souls-like. But once it clicked that Hollow Knight is a Metroidvania, the way I approached and viewed the game completely changed. No longer was I overly frustrated with it, and instead I became more and more enamored with its world. Everything just started making sense, and to be clear, this doesn't reflect my opinions on Souls-likes. I'm a big fan of From Software's games. You can find loads of them reviewed on this channel, and I've played through all of their Souls games, Bloodborne and Elden Ring. By the end of my Hollow Knight journey, I viewed it as a Metroidvania with a Souls-inspired world and story, and challenging boss fights that strongly reminded me of Mega Man games for the sheer amount of pattern recognition and memorization required to beat them. Though that last one could really be tied to just about any 2D action platformer, I just always default to Mega Man as that's what I grew up on. Getting into the nitty-gritty of it, Hollow Knight has players explore a mysterious kingdom of bugs that's falling into decay. The player isn't given the exact details of why this is happening at first, instead having to learn more about it from NPC dialogue and environmental storytelling. Like I said, there's definite Souls influence in this game, though it has a bit more of a sense of humor, at least in my opinion. And our little bug knight, who I frequently called Hollow Knight to the annoyance of my wife, has to uncover and learn more about this world while fighting tooth and nail against its inhabitants. However, there are some friendly faces to be found, mostly in the hub area called Dirtmouth, located at the top of the map. Some enemies also become allies, which was welcome news, and now I'm looking forward to where that goes, if Silksong ever actually comes out. Hollow Knight follows a very typical Metroidvania formula, with the player being limited in progression until they unlock additional abilities. And as is the standard, these are often found after defeating bosses. If there's one thing that helps Hollow Knight stand out, it's the heavy focus on platforming. Sure, Metroidvania games typically have platforming in them, but it's not often that they are as important as the exploration. For example, I've never played a Castlevania game that has challenged my platforming abilities. Instead, all of its progression is simply locked behind gaining new movement skills, and using them to move forward is like fitting a piece into a puzzle. In Hollow Knight, the platforming elements are just as important as combat and exploration, and you have to be good at it to proceed. And this really does make Hollow Knight unique when compared to its contemporaries, which often treat movement skills as puzzle pieces instead of abilities to be utilized whenever the player sees fit. Heck, I just reviewed Chasm, and it's a by-the-book Metroidvania that does just that. And while I enjoyed it, it isn't hard to tell it lacks something compared to Hollow Knight. Now to be clear, that's less of a dig against Chasm and more of a compliment to Hollow Knight. It has that special sauce needed to make it a game that stands the test of time. At least I believe so. And not many games find that, which is why it's worth highlighting. Importantly, Hollow Knight has combat that's easy to understand, but can be incredibly hard to master. The use of the nail, our main character's weapon of choice, can be used to slash away at enemies, or slice them from above for some extra air. It's a simple and powerful weapon, but man if I didn't hate the knockback from attacking. The little bit of pushback that it gives when hitting an enemy frustrated me in the early hours of the game. Fortunately, there's a charm players can equip to get rid of this, and I did so as soon as I found it. And I suppose now is the perfect time to explain charms. These are items players collect that grant different abilities to the knight. Players need charm notches to equip these, which they can find throughout the game, expanding the number of charms that can be equipped. There's about 40 charms in total, presenting players with a huge amount of possibilities for mixing and matching to suit their playstyle. For me, the physical combat charms were a huge focus, such as those increasing attack speed, distance, and power. However, I also got a lot of use out of some of the others, like the Wayward Compass that shows the player where they are on the map, which is something that I felt should have just been an innate ability and not a charm. I also employed the Gathering Swarm to collect spare Geo for me, as well as Baldur's Shell to prevent damage when healing. And of course, Shape of Un was my MVP for much of the game. The smaller form it grants when using focus was perfect for dodging boss attacks and healing at the same time. Of course, players can switch out charms at any bench, which is akin to a bonfire if we're using Souls terms. There are also other collectibles in Hollow Knight that players will want to seek out. That includes mask parts, which increase the knight's total health when 4 are obtained, as well as vessel fragments, which increase soul after 3 are found. I should also mention real quick that soul is the resource used for healing and more. There's quite a few magical abilities in the game that rely off of it. I just never use them much, and as a result, don't have much to say about them. Maybe someday I'll do a more magic-focused run, but that seems unlikely if my continued use of strength and poise builds in Souls games are anything to go by. Of course, I do have to talk about the boss fights in Hollow Knight, as they are one of the reasons so many people compare the game to Dark Souls. To give some quick context without spoiling anything, I got the true ending of Hollow Knight and I completed the Grim Troop DLC. I did not do the Pantheon, as the boss rush style of DLC wasn't really what I wanted from Hollow Knight. Even so, I've seen most of what the game has to offer in terms of challenge, and yes, it can be hard. There's no denying that. I had more than a few times when a boss absolutely wrecked me, forcing me to make multiple attempts and rethink my charms before I could defeat them. But to be clear, I don't consider that to be a Dark Souls element. Like, it's a similarity to be sure, but I'm not gonna act like 2D games of years gone haven't been stuffed to the brim with difficult boss fights. And while I'm not going to be doing a deep dive into the story of Hollow Knight, I will say that it has that special brand of mystery that appeals to me. I love it when a game doesn't spell everything out for the player, instead forcing them to come to their own conclusions. This is something the Souls series is known for, and is easily the strongest comparison between Hollow Knight and those games. I loved getting into the lore of the game, connecting all of the dots while I played, and then having ongoing conversations with my wife as I learned more about the world and we discussed what certain things meant or could mean. And speaking of the world of Hollow Knight, it's beautiful. My love of pixel art made me a little hesitant about Hollow Knight's visual style, largely because I overly worry about hit and hurt boxes when it comes to these type of games. But the style won me over as I continued to experience more of the beautiful and sometimes downright horrifying environments present in the game. Seriously, if I never have to enter the Deepness again, I will be all too pleased. And it's not just the world of Hollow Knight that's visually appealing. The characters in the game have such charm in their designs that quickly convey so much about them, even if they're bugs. It's a real case of clear and concise character designs that really deserve praise. Finally, let's talk about the audio of Hollow Knight. The music in this game is great, hands down some of the best I've heard in an indie title, and some of the songs punch well above what I expected. If you're a Hollow Knight fan, I really don't need to tell you just how memorable some of the tracks are and how they all fit so perfectly with their corresponding areas, creating wonderful atmospheres that draw players deeper into the world. Green Path was hands down the best song in the game, and it matches so well with the lush green area of the same name. Now, I'm not a huge music analysis guy, but the chimes and flutes heard in the song ooze atmosphere into an area covered in green vines, fireflies, and running waterfalls. It creates this air of tranquility and mystery, and is a song that I always enjoy hearing. It just puts a guy at ease, you know? Overall, I am so glad I didn't drop Hollow Knight. Getting into the game was rough for me, but the experience I came out of it with was amazing, making it one of the best indie games I've ever played. I want more of this world, and I hope Silksong will deliver on that this year, even if I have to wait for my wife to play it first before I get to. Thanks for stopping by, and I hope you enjoyed this video and my ongoing Year of the Indie event. It might be about time to give a retro game a look, so keep an eye out for a retrospective as my next video. Until then, take it easy.